my name is Christie Gribble. I'm with Fannin County Economic Development, which my main job is about businesses and jobs, but I have an extensive background in campus recruiting, so hiring students from colleges to either do internships or start a job with large corporations. So I spent a good amount of time in campus recruiting for large corporations in Atlanta, and I've looked at tons of resumes, done thousands of interviews, so I have a lot of experience, and today I wanted to share with you some tips for building your resume, how to use your resume, and then interview tips on how to get the job. First thing to consider with a resume, what is it even? A resume is a snapshot of you. It's an advertisement of what you have to offer for a business. As a college student, you're going to want to put your educational background, your work experience, any skills that you might have, some personal experiences, and volunteer work. For instance, if you are a volunteer at your church as a Bible study teacher, that's something that you could put on there. It shows initiative, just a few examples. But this resume is something that will help you stand out as an individual who's looking for a job. Now, I want to pause for a minute. There are some jobs here locally that may not require a resume. You may just have to fill out a handwritten application. But if you have a resume and you walk into a business establishment and you can say, "Hi, I'm interested in this position. Here's my resume. Could I fill out an application?" That shows initiative. There are a lot of businesses here that if they see a well-written resume, they know that you're already a professional, potential employee with initiative. Why? Why have a resume? It helps you get an interview for a job. How would a person know that you're a good candidate if they don't know some of your skill sets and some of your background when they're looking to interview you? And you have to make yourself stand out. So I was looking up some data just to give you a perspective. On average, there are 250 resumes submitted for a job opening at a large corporation in Atlanta. 250. So of those 250, on average, 4 to 6 candidates are called in for an interview. It's kind of a scary number. So what can you do to stand out? A lot of times, these people are simply looking at your application, which includes a resume. So again, this resume is going to help you stand out if, for instance, there are 250 other candidates who applied for the same job. We're going to do a little exercise. You at home, I want you to take out a piece of paper and a pen, and we're going to do a little brainstorming session. Spend, 5-10 minutes and go through this exercise. If you don't have a resume, this is going to be the starting point for you. If you do have a resume, you can utilize this to help fill in some gaps or make your resume better. I want you to make a list. Write down your education. So think back to, and some of you may be in high school, but high school. What have you done in high school that has stood out? Did you have a GPA or certain grades that stood out? Make a list. If you have graduated already, write down when you graduated. Okay, so education. What you're doing with UNG now, what courses you're taking, when you're expected to graduate, or what your next steps are after completing UNG Blue Ridge. Then go to work experience. Some of you may not have work experience, and that's okay. If you do, put it down. Think about what you might do for your family, if you could consider that work experience. If your family has a small business that they operate and you help on the weekends, that counts. Make a list of that. Think about your skills and your abilities. Maybe on the side, at home, you enjoy building games. I know some young people get into gaming. That's something, I couldn't even fathom, but that could be a skill set that could really stand out for an employer. So think about your skills and abilities that you have adopted through even hobbies. And then your interests and talents. Go ahead and make a list of some of those things. Maybe you practice piano and have been taking lessons for 10 years. Jot that down. We might find a spot for that on your resume that could make a difference. If you enjoy golf and playing tennis, jot that down. So this is going to be a list of just about everything you have to offer. Again, a snapshot of yourself. And on this list, go back and make sure you put dates, jot some dates down. When were you taking piano lessons? When have you learned about gaming? When have you been in a club at school, for instance? So jot those dates down. This is the beginning exercise to get your resume up and going. I'm going to recommend that you get a template of a resume. UNG might have something to offer. I'm sure if you ask one of the counselors or leaders here at UNG Blue Ridge, they could help you with a resume template. If you use Microsoft Word, there are templates out there. You can do a quick Google search to find a template. But what I'm going to recommend is only a recommendation. You can structure your resume any way that you want. But again, this is just a recommendation based on the many resumes that I've looked at. And for someone who is currently in school, I'm recommending based on that. So I've been in the workforce for over 10 years. My work experience is more important at this point in my career than my education. Your education is probably the most important. So I'm going to move it more on to the top of the list of what goes into the resume. So I'm going to talk through resume components, okay? And so at home, you can be using a resume template. You're going to have a heading, and it's going to have your name. You can put your address, your phone number, and your email. This is one of the most important parts of the resume, and you're going to need to proofread this part multiple times. Because if you mess up your email address or your phone number, they're not going to know how to contact you. So double check those numbers and letters and make sure you got everything right. But this is how these employers are going to know how to contact you. So that's going to be at the top. I would suggest putting an objective in under that. Talk about why you're looking for a job. Now, it can be broad or it can be specific. If you know that you're going to apply to one business, you can put in that objective, I want to work here because I have a strong interest in this and my skill sets align with this job, just as an example. Have an objective. I would then suggest education. Put your education in there. If you're currently at UNG Blue Ridge, put that first, and then you can put your high school information. Include a GPA and maybe some bullets about some of the academic highlights of your time in high school or in college. Then you're going to add work experience. So again, some of you may not have work experience, and that's okay. We can find other ways to fill in your resume. But if you've worked part-time at a bank on the weekends, fill that in and do a few bullet points of what your responsibilities are. And then you're going to put the date out to the side. Now, if you've had 5 part-time jobs, put those in there, but put the most recent jobs first. So you're going to list your resume in each of these sections, work experience in particular, chronological order. So your most recent jobs first. If 5 years ago you did a part-time job with your family business, but you only worked there 1 year, put it in, and that may have been the furthest job you had away, so it would be at the bottom of the list. Then we're going to add a section on skills. And again, you may want to put this at the top. You can adjust the order, but an example of skills might be you may have never worked in welding, but at home your dad has a welding shop and you've been doing welding with your dad for 5 years. That's a skill set that could help you in the future. So I put that in there. There may be other skills that you've developed over your course of time in high school. You may know the Microsoft Suite very well. I know a lot of people use Google these days, but that in itself, if you're proficient, if you've done it a lot and you consider yourself an expert, put that in there. And then some other things that you can add are awards and volunteer work. If you volunteer for the local food bank or for some of the festivals that take place in Blue Ridge, put that in there. It shows initiative. Some things to think about too is if you can't find anything to put in your resume, start looking for opportunities to go out there and volunteer, or some skill sets that you can work on yourself at home. Or maybe go get a part-time job so you can start building your resume. I would suggest keeping your resume to one page. Recruiters and employers like a simple snapshot, again, of what you have to offer. If it's 3 pages long, a lot of these people are busy and they're probably not going to want to read that. Now, I will say my resume at this stage in my career, again, I've been working for over 10 years, it's about 1.5 pages. Very important information that I wanted to keep in there. At your stage, keep it 1 page. Keep it simple. Some don'ts about your resume, and these are very important don'ts. Number 1, do not lie. If you want a job that requires a certain skill set and you put on your resume, I'm going to use an example. If the job requires someone to be proficient in Spanish, meaning that you can speak the Spanish language, and you put on there you're proficient in Spanish, in the interview you're going to have to speak some Spanish. Or when you go into the job, you're going to have to speak some Spanish, and if you don't know how to, they will find that out. Just don't lie on your resume. Be honest. It will be uncovered if you put something on there that is not true. Again, keep it to 1 page. Use consistent font throughout your resume, and that's something you can do. And whether you're using Google or Microsoft Word, you can check your font, but use the same thing. Keep it consistent. Use action verbs. So, gonna give an example. If you were getting a job as a receptionist, you might put organize files daily, or aid clients with questions, answer phone calls daily. That's if you have the job right now. If you had the job 2 years ago and you're not working there anymore, but you were a receptionist, you might put organized files or aided clients. So action verbs are very important when you're putting your bullet points of what you did in these specific jobs. And then have someone proofread it and proofread it and proofread it. So you don't want to have errors. You want to have consistent grammar within your resume. I just want to pull out my resume from when I was in college. And I forgot to tell you, I'm an alum of University of North Georgia. Before it was in Blue Ridge, it wasn't an option for me. I went to University of North Georgia in Dahlonega and graduated. So I think highly of the college. And just gonna share with you some of the things I included on my resume back in the day. So I started with education. Of course, I had my contact information at the top, but I did a dual major, so I put both majors, and then I did a minor, so I listed that as well along with my GPA. I did some study abroad, so I titled that International Studies and Cultural Experience, and I listed what took place during those studies. Moved down to professional experience. Something I did during college was a student assistant for the School of Business. So that gave me some work experience, along with some weekend work that I did back home. I got involved as a leader in a club, and I put that in as some other experience, and I was a Spanish tutor for a colleague, so I put that in as other experience. And then some memberships of some other clubs that I was involved in. 1 page. So attached to my resume, and I haven't talked much about references or cover letters, those are whole other topics that we could get into at another time, but I did attach references to my resume. So if an employer wanted to know that I actually did that job, again, going back to not lying, I could put references on there of someone who this employer could call and say, yes, Christie did an excellent job at this, and this is some of the things that she did while she was with us. I would typically suggest that you call the person that you want to list as a reference if you include a reference with your resume or application. So how would you find a job? There are lots of different ways to do this. I'm gonna tell you my favorite last, but here locally, some things that you could do are to look in the newspaper. There are a lot of jobs are listed in the classifieds. That's a start. Do a Google search. What you'll probably find is Indeed.com or something like that will pop up for jobs in Blue Ridge. There's actually a lot out there right now. I did a search earlier this week, and sometimes you can apply directly through Indeed.com, and if you have that resume, you can upload it. LinkedIn is another resource. You can create a LinkedIn profile now. Recruiters use this to actually recruit employees to come in, but you can search jobs on LinkedIn. If you know that you want to work at a specific business here in Fannin County, you can go directly to that website, and most of the time jobs will be listed on the website. You may have to search a little bit. The Department of Labor, we have an office here locally. They have a website called Employ Georgia, and you can go on there to search for jobs. A lot is done electronically. You can just search on the internet. Word of mouth. Sometimes you may have a friend that just knows of a job opening and you're like, oh, I'm interested, and you can contact that business. My favorite way is just to go to the business, introduce yourself, give them your resume and say, I would be interested in working with your business if you have a position. Here's my resume. If they don't have something open, you could say, please keep this on file and call me. I'd love to stay in touch. I could check in a couple months to see if you might have something, or feel free to call me. But if you know you want something, go for it. So making that initiative to go in and introduce yourself is proactive, and again, shows a lot of initiative. So that's finding a job opening. Let's say you get the call. Hi, Christie, we would like to call you in for an interview. That's one of the most exciting phone calls you can get. What I will say, as you're in the job hunt, don't be scared of phone calls. I know that a lot of the younger generation tends to text. Don't be scared of a phone call. Answer your phone, check your voicemail, take that call. It's so exciting to get that phone call when you get called in for an interview. So you're prepping at home for that interview. These are a couple tips that are going to help you immensely when you go into the job interview. I've personally interviewed for jobs several times. These techniques I'm going to tell you have helped me every single time in getting the job. So I want you to read the job description. Read it again, have some notes, note paper to take some notes. The job description may say something like, answer phone calls on a regular basis. You could jot down some notes about that, and then have a section with questions. So what types of phone calls would this employee expect to get? So jot some questions down while you read the job description. Research the company. Go to their website, read about what they do, read their values. You could jot down a question. Could you tell me more about what the company's mission statement is? Those will show that you've taken the initiative, you know what the company does, you know what this job description says, you want to learn more, and it really shows professionalism when you go into the interview. So those are a few things that I would say are extremely important in preparing for the interview. There's also some other things that you can do to prepare. So I'm going to run through just a short list of typical interview questions that you can practice at home with somebody or practice with a friend, but practice and take some sample questions and have answers for them. Have your notes with you. It's okay to have notes in an interview. Don't be scripted, but have your notes there so that you could glance at them if you need it. But practice what you might say in the instance that they'd ask certain questions. So let's talk about a few of the example questions that might come for a job interview. Tell me about yourself. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? The what are your weaknesses is a hard one. If you get asked that question, it's okay to say what your weaknesses are, but follow it up with a positive. You might get a question like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Prep for that. What would you say in that instance? What makes you stand out as a candidate? Why you versus the 10 other people who have applied to this job? Tell me about times you have exercised leadership. So again, these are just a few examples, but have some prepared answers in case you get a question that's similar to this. You also might get an off-the-wall question. It depends on who your interviewer might be. Different people have different personalities, but I've had this question before, and this was really hard for me. Someone said, here's a pen, I want you to sell me this pen. How would you do that? So you might prepare for an off-the-wall question. Or if you came back in 5 years as an animal, what would you be? Think about those off-the-wall questions and how you might answer them. Be prepared for anything. So typically when you go into an interview, the first thing you would do is a firm handshake, look the person in the eye, give them your name. Hi, my name is Christie. I would suggest having a brief introduction message prepared. Hi, my name's Christie Gribble. I am so excited to be here at this interview. Thank you so much for having me. Can't wait to learn a little bit more about the position. And most interviews will have a set of prepared questions ready to go. Something you could do is ask the interviewer a question. So say you don't know how long the person has worked there. You could say, can you tell me a little bit about what you do at the company? And that gets the interviewer talking, and it makes the situation very comfortable, and you can relax a little bit while they talk. Ask the interviewer what the next steps are in the process. So you finish the interview. It's fair to ask, when do you expect to make a decision, and when could I expect to hear from you? It's a fair question. I would ask for a way to contact the interviewer, whether it be a business card. You could ask if they have a business card or an email address. Reason being is I'm going to suggest that you always follow up with a thank you. You can follow up with a thank you email or note, a handwritten mailed note, which I would highly suggest. Sometimes you just may not have access or may not have time to write the note. You can send an email, that matters too. But in my days of recruiting, I kept thousands of thank you notes. I kept about 10 very special thank you notes, and I'm gonna tell you why in a minute. In reading those, there were some very specific things that these students at the time, candidates for the job, would write in their thank you notes. So we had really great interviews, very professional, and then it will have ended and we may have talked about some of our hobbies that we liked. And this person may have written, I hope you have good luck in your tennis match next week, something like that. You can make your thank you notes personal so that you're bringing out something specific from the conversation. Those thank you notes can really make an impact on how the interviewer feels about you as a candidate and you possibly getting the job. We'll talk about it. So you can see in action what works really well or doesn't in an interview setting.
Hi.
Hi. Anna, how you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. So have a seat. Thanks for coming in today.
Thanks. You know, I've applied for so many jobs, I can't quite remember what I'm here for. Can you tell me a little bit about it?
Yeah, okay. So I was hoping you had read the job description since you did apply online, but as a refresher, we're looking for a front desk receptionist for our small business.
Oh, okay. Well, do you think it would be all right if I had my phone while I was working?
You're permitted to have your phone, but you need to keep it on silent or do not disturb. But you're also expected to keep it out of sight and not check it during work hours. We want you to give your full attention to the customers.
Okay, so what if I have to like get a hold of my friends?
Okay, so you can take a break periodically. There'll be some time during your schedule. You can take a bathroom break and check your phone and maybe respond to a text, or do it during your lunch hour, but not any other times.
Okay. And what is the pay for this position?
Yeah, okay, so we will actually not talk about pay until later on in the process. This is an example of a not so good interview, and I'm gonna tell you a few reasons why. Miss Anna was rocking back and forth in the chair. You know, sometimes your mannerisms could be to move a lot. That's distracting. She didn't even know what the job was. So again, prepare. She did not seem interested at all in doing the job. She was more concerned about how she was going to keep up with her friends when she was working. And then I'm going to suggest this. Don't ask about pay during your first interview or your first conversation. It shows that you're not interested in the job itself, that you may be interested in other things, and employers really want to know that you want to do the job. So again, that was an example of a bad interview that I couldn't imagine an employer would hire someone after that scenario. And now we're going to do a good example. Hey, Anna.
Hi, Miss Gribble.
Come on in.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your interest in the job.
Oh, well, thank you for inviting me in for an interview for the receptionist position.
Yeah.
I'm interested.
So glad you're interested. So tell me what makes you a good candidate for this position.
Well, currently I'm a hardworking college student, so I work during the day and then take classes in the evening, so that frees up my day.
Yeah.
During high school and on the weekends, I work with my family's small grocery business, so I
Okay.
learn my customer skills that way.
Okay, that's wonderful. Do you enjoy that?
I do. I like
Okay.
the interaction with the public.
Great. So tell me about a time you had to deal with an upset customer on the phone or in person in your work with the family business.
Well, I recall one time in particular, this gentleman called and needed some tomatoes, and at that time we were out of tomatoes. We didn't have any, but I knew when the shipment was coming in. I talked to the gentleman and let him know when the shipment would come in, and then took his contact information and let him know that I would call him as soon as the tomatoes arrived. And he wasn't very happy with that response, and he got a little upset with me, but I just calmly reassured him by telling him, reading back his contact information and letting him know that I would call him as soon as they arrived.
And that's a great way to handle it. You can't always make everyone happy. So what do you plan to do after college? We would like this person to stay in this position for as long as possible, but we understand you might have other plans in the future.
Yeah, well, I do have a couple of years of my core classes left, and so I expect to be here at least that long, and then after my core is finished, then I'll go ahead and enter nursing school.
Yeah. Okay, that sounds great. We will be in touch with you in the next couple of days. Do you have any questions?
I don't, thank you so much.
Okay, all right. So that was a really great example of a successful interview. So I'm going to tell you a few things that made that a good interview. Miss Anna was dressed very professionally. As opposed to the first interview, she was more casual. I'm going to suggest in any scenario that you dress up for an interview. Again, it shows professionalism. She was engaged, very good eye contact. She came in confident. She practiced what she might say, and while she didn't have notes, it's okay to have notes, but she knew what she was going to say. She didn't have to have that. She was very confident and prepared. She knew what the job was that she was interviewing for. So again, good example of how an interview could be handled, and it was conversational. So these are just everything we've talked about today, just a few tips, just a few suggestions. Your scenario may be a little different. You may have a different type of interviewer with you, but these are some things that you can expect as you put yourself into the workforce. And I want to wish you good luck. There are all sorts of resources out there to help you find a mentor. These wonderful leaders at University of North Georgia can be very helpful to you. And you can feel free to look me up as well with Fannin County Economic Development, and I'm glad to help. So again, good luck.